Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, because what you're about to hear is a true story that stunned every official, shook an entire airport, and proved that sometimes silence barks the loudest. At Chicago O'Hare, during a snowstorm, a highly trained police dog named Peter suddenly blocked a veteran pilot from boarding his plane. No alarms, no weapons. Just one dog, refusing to move. Everyone thought it was a glitch, until they checked beneath the cockpit seat, and what they found sent federal agents running. Stay with us, because this isn't just a story about a working dog. It's about a decision that saved hundreds of lives, and a hero who never needed to speak. It began with a sound that cut through the noise like a blade. A sharp bark, loud, purposeful, impossible to ignore, rattled across Terminal B of Chicago O'Hare International Airport. People turned. Lattes froze mid-sip. Phones dropped. And for a moment, even the snowstorm outside seemed to hold its breath. Officer Ethan Reeves jerked back slightly, fingers tightening around the leash. He'd heard Peter bark before dozens of times, but not like this, not with this tone. This wasn't a false alert or a bored growl. This was his partner's voice saying, "Something is very wrong." Peter, a sable German shepherd trained under the Department of Homeland Security, stood stiff-legged in the middle of the security checkpoint, hackles raised, muscles coiled. His focus had narrowed like a laser beam, locked not on a weapon or a suspicious bag, but on a man in full pilot uniform, walking briskly toward the crew-only gate. Captain Daniel Harrington. Reeves blinked, caught off guard. "Peter, heel." No response. "Peter, heel." More firm this time. Nothing. Instead, Peter lunged forward, not to attack, but to block. He placed himself squarely in front of the pilot, his paws planted, his body rigid, his bark rising in pitch and urgency. Passengers gasped. Security staff looked up. A toddler started crying. The pilot, mid-40s, polished ID badge clipped to his coat, tried to sidestep. Peter mirrored him, tried again, blocked again. "Control your dog," Harrington snapped, visibly irritated. "I've got an international flight to command, and you're delaying 243 passengers." "I'm sorry, sir," Reeves said, stepping in between them. His voice was calm, but his heart was racing. "But my partner doesn't behave like this without reason. I've flown for American Airlines for 15 years. The captain barked back. "This is ridiculous." Passengers were filming now. A man in a scarf muttered, "Unbelievable," while a woman in line whispered, "He's just a dog." Reeves heard all of it, but tuned them out. His eyes were on Peter. The shepherd wasn't just barking anymore. He was trembling slightly, teeth bared but controlled, issuing short, clipped barks, each one sharper than the last. He was no longer simply alerting. He was insisting. A voice crackled through Reeves's earpiece. "Reeves, report. What's the holdup?" He pressed his mic. 9 is flagging a pilot, Captain Daniel Harrington. "I'm requesting immediate secondary screening." Silence. Then secondary screening for flight crew. "You sure?" Reeves stared at Peter. "I'm sure." By now, Airport Security Supervisor Rachel Coleman had arrived, cool-headed, authoritative, with a clipboard tucked under one arm and a no-nonsense look in her eyes. She pulled Reeves aside, her voice low. "What's happening?" "Peter won't let him through," Reeves replied, nodding at the still growling dog. "First time in 3 years he's disobeyed a command." Coleman glanced at the pilot, then back at Peter. "And you want to delay a transatlantic flight because of a dog's hunch?" "No," Reeves said slowly. "Because of this dog's instinct." Rachel Coleman hesitated. Her reputation was built on efficiency and protocol, not gut feelings. But even she had heard of Peter the Professor, they called him. A 9 that processed sent data, the way others processed logic. Still, the political fallout would be enormous. Protocol allows random screenings, even for crew, Reeves added. The captain let out a low, incredulous laugh. "This isn't random, this is harassment." Reeves noticed it then, a flicker in the man's face. Not just annoyance, not just the inconvenience of delay, something else. Tension, slight, barely visible, but real. He caught it again in the man's hands, a tremor, faint but unmistakable. "Sir," Coleman said, stepping forward, her voice firm, "we'll make this quick. Please follow us to the private screening room." "This is outrageous," Harrington protested. "I want a supervisor. I want to call." "You'll be able to do that. But right now, you're coming with us." Harrington opened his mouth, but closed it just as quickly. Something had changed in him. He turned on his heel and followed, lips tight, eyes darting once, just once, toward the nearest exit sign. Peter followed too, steps controlled, gaze never shifting. His body was taut, but his tail stayed level, not aggressive, not frightened, just locked in. They moved down the side hallway in silence. Security cameras followed. Phones kept filming from a distance. Behind them, murmurs thickened. Is the dog broken? Must have smelled drugs. Or maybe explosives. Reeves ignored it all. Every part of him screamed that this wasn't a false flag. This wasn't Peter being tired, distracted, or confused. No, this was a warning, a gut-level, bone-deep, fur-on-edge warning, and Reeves knew this much for sure. Peter had never been wrong before. Still, as they reached the private screening room, doubts began to creep in. What if this was the time Peter was wrong? What if it was just medication on the man's jacket, or residual scent from another dog at home? What if Reeves had just derailed an entire international flight over nothing? But then he glanced down at Peter again. The shepherd hadn't blinked, hadn't relaxed, hadn't wavered. He was watching, waiting, ready. And Ethan Reeves made a decision. He'd trust Peter not because he was trained to, not because it was protocol, not because he had no other options, but because this wasn't about trust anymore. This was about belief, about choosing to believe in the partner who never needed to speak to be heard. To be continued in part 2. The search begins. The jacket looks clean. The bag is empty. But Peter's eyes never move, because he knows something is still hidden. The private screening room was plain too plain. White walls, metal table, sterile lighting that hummed faintly overhead. It was designed to keep emotions flat, controlled. But inside, everything felt razor-edged. Captain Daniel Harrington sat stiffly in the metal chair, arms folded, jaw tight. His uniform was still immaculate, pressed to perfection. But a layer of discomfort clung to him now, faint but visible. His hands trembled, almost imperceptibly. Not from cold. Across from him, Officer Ethan Reeves remained silent. He wasn't watching the pilot anymore. He was watching Peter, and Peter was watching the jacket. 9 Officer Peter, still and coiled beside the door, had not shifted his gaze since they entered. His focus remained fixed on one spot, the left lapel of Harrington's uniform. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just stared, like he was waiting for the world to catch up to something he already knew. Transportation Security Officer Marcus Wong finished inspecting the captain's duffel bag. He laid out the contents one by one: navigation charts, flight manuals, spare epaulets, sunglasses, a toiletry kit, an energy bar, textbook items. Nothing out of place. Peter didn't blink. "Everything checks out," Wong said to Reeves, voice low. Still nothing from Peter. Rachel Coleman entered the room, her steps quick, her radio still warm from use. Backup pilots being prepped. "We've got 15 minutes before we delay the entire flight. Do we have anything?" Reeves didn't answer right away. His eyes dropped to Peter. The dog's ears were still trained forward, nose twitching, not in panic, not in confusion, but in something sharper. Focus. "Harrington," Reeves said finally, "please remove your jacket." The pilot hesitated, only for a second. Then, with exaggerated care, he shrugged it off and placed it on the table, flattening it like a protest. "This is beyond any standard procedure." "I appreciate your cooperation," Reeves said, but his tone carried weight, now quiet, unshakable, the tone of someone who has decided to follow the dog, no matter what it costs. Wong began checking the jacket. His hands moved with professional ease, sliding into pockets, brushing the seams. Standard fabric, airline issued, tailored. Nothing stood out. Peter rose slowly. Reeves noticed it immediately. He moved forward, unclipping Peter's leash, but keeping one hand at the ready. Let him approach, he told Wong, who stepped aside. Peter circled the table once, then returned to the jacket. He sniffed the cuffs, the back, the buttons methodical. Then he reached the collar and froze. Nose pressed to the left lapel, Peter stayed motionless for a heartbeat. Then another. Then he raised one paw and tapped the fabric twice, gently but with complete certainty. Wong looked at Reeves. "He's indicating, he's isolating," Reeves replied quietly. "There's something there." The stitching looked normal, neat, tight, airline issue. But Reeves leaned in and noticed something only a trained handler would. The thread on the left lapel was just a shade tighter than the right. Almost imperceptible. Almost. "I need a portable scanner," he said to Coleman. "For non-metallic concealment, the kind they use for fiber optic or microchip detection." She hesitated. "Ethan, that jacket's worth. If there's nothing, the department will pay him back," he cut in. Coleman didn't argue. She made the call. Peter sat again beside the table, tail still, chest rising slowly. Harrington didn't look at the dog. He was staring at the wall now, like he could will himself through it. 15 minutes later, the technician arrived with a handheld scanner, sleek, portable, designed for field use. Everyone leaned in as he passed it over the jacket. First, pass clear. Second, clear. Then the wand glided over the left lapel. Beep, faint. But there, he adjusted the settings, narrowed the scan, and passed again. On the screen, a rectangular shadow, thin, embedded. "What is that?" Coleman asked. Leaning forward, the technician frowned. "Looks like a flexible electronic strip, something custom, not commercial." Reeves stared at the screen. Microcontroller? Could be. All eyes turned to the captain. Daniel Harrington, David Kaiser, though they didn't know that yet, remained still. But his lips had lost color. His chest moved more rapidly now. The mask was slipping. "I want a lawyer," he said. Reeves crouched beside Peter. The shepherd had finally relaxed, just slightly. "Mission, for now, complete." "Good boy," he whispered. "You saw through what we couldn't." Rachel Coleman stepped out of the room to alert the FBI. The technician began carefully removing the embedded item, peeling back the lapel seam with steady hands. Reeves stood by silently, running over every decision in his mind, not because he doubted them, but because of how close they'd come. Peter had sensed something machines couldn't detect, and the questions began forming fast. How? How did a dog find a device invisible to X-rays, undetectable by sniffers, masked by layers of fabric? The answer would come later, from experts and behavioral analysts. They would say Peter likely picked up on micro-vibrations, barely perceptible shifts in frequency that human ears could never register. They would say Peter's olfactory system, already 40 times more sensitive than a human's, may have caught trace molecular particles emitted from glue or printed circuit materials. A scent too faint for detection, but just strong enough for Peter. They would say it was extraordinary, but Reeves didn't need science to explain what he'd just seen. He'd seen belief, focus, certainty, and that was enough. As the technician lifted the strip into a plastic evidence sleeve, the room shifted, the atmosphere changed. Harrington no longer looked like a delayed pilot. He looked like someone who'd just lost control of something far larger than himself. Coleman returned, flanked now by 2 FBI agents. "We need to take this further," she said. "He's not who he says he is." Reeves nodded. He glanced at Peter, who was now sniffing around the chair legs, the floor, the perimeter of the room. "Still alert, still working. You think we're done?" Reeves muttered. Peter barked once, sharp. The technician turned. Reeves turned. Peter had stopped next to the far wall, his nose now pressed against the pilot's radio transmitter, still resting on the table. Reeves narrowed his eyes. The jacket was just the beginning. To be continued in part 3. The pilot isn't just carrying a device. He is the device. And the story about who he really is about to explode. Peter's bark had barely faded when the room turned electric. Agent Victor Ramirez from the FBI stepped in with quiet urgency. tablet in hand, eyes scanning everyone in the room before settling on the man once known as Captain Daniel Harrington. "We just got a hit," Ramirez announced, his tone clinical but tight. Facial recognition matched him to a global red notice. Real name, David Alan Kaiser, former commercial pilot. Disappeared from Interpol tracking 3 years ago during a layover in Frankfurt. Kaiser didn't flinch, not immediately, but something in his posture shifted, a slouch in his shoulders, a flicker of tension in his jaw. The mask was cracking. Coleman looked stunned. "That name's tied to Ascension, isn't it?" Ramirez gave a sharp nod. "One of their early operators, known for infiltration, hasn't surfaced until today." A sharp click echoed through the room as an agent snapped open a set of cuffs. "Mr. Kaiser, you're under arrest for falsifying identity, impersonating a federal aviation officer, and suspected terrorism." Before the words finished hanging in the air, Kaiser lunged. The move was sudden and violent, his chair toppling as he surged forward, still cuffed, but with terrifying strength. 2 agents dove to tackle him, slamming him back into the table, but Kaiser twisted and jerked sideways, teeth clenched. Then Peter growled, a deep, guttural warning. Kaiser bit down hard, his jaw trembling on something in his mouth. "Suicide capsule!" Ramirez shouted. Reeves sprang forward, joining the agents who were now prying open Kaiser's jaw. Foaming residue leaked from the side of his mouth. A half-dissolved capsule clung to his tongue, but it wasn't fully swallowed. A medic sprinted into the room, forced open his airway, and suctioned out the rest. "Heart rate's dropping," someone yelled. "Get him to medical now." The hallway exploded into controlled chaos as medics wheeled Kaiser out on a gurney, IVs already flowing, oxygen mask pressed to his face. His skin had turned ash grey. His eyes fluttered open, then shut, but he was still breathing barely. Coleman stared at the trail of wet shoe prints and broken silence. "That wasn't panic," she said quietly. "That was protocol." Ramirez didn't reply. He was already on the phone, calling DHS, Interpol, and 3 other agencies in rapid succession. Meanwhile, in the cockpit of the aircraft Kaiser had planned to command, the inspection team, guided by Peter, was pulling apart the co-pilot seat. It was Peter's second alert in less than an hour. And like before, he didn't bark aimlessly. He pressed his nose to the seat, pawed twice, then sat staring at the base of the cushion. The technician carefully peeled back the synthetic fabric. What looked like standard structural material turned out to be a false panel, barely a quarter-inch thick. Behind it, an embedded device, custom-shaped to match the contours of the cockpit. "Confirming this is an explosive," the tech said after scanning. "Low metal, remote detonated, shielded casing." Ramirez arrived moments later. "How bad?" Reeves asked. The technician didn't sugarcoat it. "If detonated mid-flight over the Atlantic, say it would breach the cockpit floor, destroy avionics, likely take out electrical and hydraulic systems." "Catastrophic," Ramirez muttered. Reeves glanced at the rows of passenger seats beyond the cockpit door. 243 people. All of them would have been lost without a single distress call, without time to react. All of it hidden, all of it perfectly planned. Back at the airport medical facility, David Kaiser was sedated, restrained, and monitored by a rotating team of doctors and armed agents. When he regained consciousness 6 hours later, his lips were dry, his voice cracked, but it was steady. Ramirez and Coleman stood at the foot of his bed. Reeves remained outside the room with Peter, who was being examined and rehydrated after hours of non-stop work. Standard procedure, but his leash was still clipped to Reeves's wrist. "We know about the bomb," Ramirez said bluntly. "We know who you are. What we don't know is how deep this goes." Kaiser said nothing. Coleman stepped forward. There were children on that flight. His jaw tensed. Families. People who trusted you. What were you going to do? Watch them die while sipping your coffee at 30,000 feet? Kaiser's voice broke the silence like a whisper against glass. It wasn't supposed to be like that. Ramirez leaned in. Start talking. And so he did, not because of remorse, not because of fear, but because something had shifted. Perhaps he realized the plan had failed. Perhaps he knew contingency protocols would kick in and his usefulness to Ascension had expired. It started in Istanbul, Kaiser began, 2019. I was flying regional routes, lonely, jaded, looking for purpose. A man approached me, casual, asked questions about security, schedules, crew rotations. We spoke 3 times over 4 months. He detailed how they built trust, how they made him feel important. They didn't preach ideology, he said. They sold structure, purpose. Ascension wasn't about chaos, it was about evolution, about proving vulnerabilities. Kaiser had been a test case. His mission was the first of 3 simultaneous attacks, all designed not to kill, but to expose weaknesses, to sow fear, to prove a point. Ramirez listened carefully. You said 3. Kaiser nodded. Paris to Chicago, Frankfurt to New York. Within 48 hours, Coleman stepped out to make the calls. There's more, Kaiser added. Ascension has a hub, a control center, hidden in plain sight. Right here, at O'Hare. Ramirez stiffened. Where? Kaiser turned his head toward the window, snowflakes drifting beyond the glass. You'll know it when Peter finds it. To be continued in Part 4. The trail leads beneath the runways to a hidden bunker, a woman with no past, and devices waiting to board planes that haven't even landed yet. The snow fell heavier now, blanketing the airport tarmac in silence, but beneath the surface, everything was moving. Ethan Reeves stood with his back against a concrete column, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Peter sat beside him, vest secured, eyes alert. The German shepherd's ears twitched with every distant metallic clink from the maintenance yard. He wasn't just ready, he was already working. This is Building C, said Commander Wilson, of the FBI Tactical Unit, pointing at a digital blueprint on a tablet. Triangulation places Cooper's signal here 2 hours ago. Ramirez nodded. No cameras. No external access points. It's the only one with a restricted sublevel. Reeves didn't speak. His hand rested gently on Peter's harness. The command was given. The team moved in silence, 3 groups from 3 sides, each step practiced, every breath timed. As the breach team reached the door, Peter's body language changed, his muscles stiffened, his tail straightened. Nose low, gate narrowed. He's got something, Reeves whispered into his radio. With a countdown hand signal, the front door blew open in a controlled breach, and the dark swallowed them whole. Inside, the space felt deceptively ordinary. Tool carts, cleaning supplies, rows of maintenance logs stacked neatly on shelves. A break room, a bulletin board with fake birthdays. But Peter didn't care about appearances. His nose led him past the desks, past the lockers, to a narrow grey door marked electrical access, authorized personnel only. Peter scratched it once, then looked back. Without hesitation, Reeves stepped forward and twisted the knob. It wasn't locked. The stairs led downward narrow, cold, the smell of dust mixing with faint traces of ozone. It wasn't on any official schematic, not even on the internal airport maintenance grid. At the bottom, a low-ceilinged room illuminated by a single flickering bulb and the icy glow of 3 flat panel screens. A woman stood in front of a laptop, her hand frozen mid-motion above the keyboard. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She reached for something inside her coat. FBI, hands where we can see them. But she didn't comply. Before her fingers made contact with the object hidden beneath her coat, 2 agents tackled her to the ground. The laptop slid across the floor, spinning wildly. Peter barked once sharp, focused, then turned from her and ran to the back of the room. As agents restrained the woman, Reeves followed Peter's lead. The shepherd had stopped in front of a tall steel cabinet. He paused twice at the lower corner. "Check it," Wilson ordered. They pulled the door open. Inside, a collection of devices, neatly arranged, unarmed but unmistakable. "Jesus," one of the bomb techs muttered. 20 of them, All variants of the device we just pulled off that aircraft. Each one was slightly different, some flat and flexible, others cylindrical, some designed to mimic power relays, some embedded within what looked like seatbelt mechanisms. Each one represented a disaster waiting to happen. Coleman stepped toward the laptop, which was now humming softly, a tech plugged in an emergency power lockout to prevent further tampering. She initiated a data wipe, the specialist confirmed, but we froze it just in time. The woman, now identified as Elena Cooper, sat silently in the corner, hands zip tied behind her back. Her expression never changed. She knew, Ramirez said. The moment Kaiser's flight didn't go down, she knew. On the screens, rows of spreadsheets, flight numbers, airport codes, names, faces, dozens of them. These are pilots, Coleman whispered. Recruitment profiles. The files showed psych evaluations, background vulnerabilities, security rotation access, and communication logs, all cross-referenced by country. And then deeper in the system, they found folders marked Tier 2 and Tier 3. Opening Tier 2 revealed blueprints, airport layouts from across the globe. Not just O'Hare, not just Chicago, but LAX, Heathrow, Dubai, Narita, JFK. They weren't planning 3 flights. They were mapping the whole system. Peter, meanwhile, hadn't moved. He was now focused on the far side of the room, sniffing near the baseboard. His nose found a vent. Reeves crouched beside him. Good boy, what have you got? The vent cover wasn't even screwed in. Inside, a matte black portable hard drive about the size of a phone. Wrapped in thermal shielding, Wilson bagged it immediately. This thing's encrypted, the tech said. But, based on file sizes, this might be everything. Peter exhaled through his nose and sat. His work, at least for now, was done. The woman was loaded into a black SUV, still silent. She didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't utter a single word. She didn't need to. The evidence was deafening. Back at the command center, agents worked around the clock. Every drive, every device, every name was catalogued, cross-referenced, and transmitted to international counterparts. Inside one of the folders, they found something chilling, a flowchart. It showed the progression of attacks. Stage 1, infiltration. Stage 2, proof of concept. Stage 3, full-scale execution. The Flight Kaiser was scheduled to pilot the final rehearsal. Reeves leaned against the wall, watching it all unfold through glass technicians typing, agents making calls, names being added to red lists by the minute. He glanced down at Peter, now lying quietly by his boots. Why you, he whispered. What did you smell that nothing else could? He thought of the threads in the uniform, the transmitter, the hard drive hidden behind the vent, all invisible, all undetectable, except to Peter. The shepherd looked up at him. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't need to. That look said it all. You weren't supposed to find any of this, but I did. Ramirez approached from the side, rubbing his temple. We just got confirmation. Similar devices were discovered at Charles de Gaulle and Frankfurt. They were going to take down 3 flights in 48 hours. Reeves nodded slowly. Peter led us straight to their brain, Ramirez added. That dog doesn't miss. No, Reeves murmured. He doesn't. As the last device was logged, as Cooper's fingerprints were sent to Interpol, as the names of compromised pilots were transmitted to airline security across the globe, Ethan stood still in the center of the room, watching the storm outside settle into thick white silence. Then he asked quietly, to no one in particular, how many more are out there, and how many won't have a dog like Peter to find them in time? To be continued in Part 5. Beneath the silence, a deeper truth is unfolding, one that not even technology can explain. What makes Peter different? What else can he see that the world can't? The snow outside had softened into flakes the size of feathers, drifting in lazy spirals past the window. Inside the operations center, agents moved with the tired precision of people running on caffeine and adrenaline. But Ethan Reeves sat still, hands folded on the edge of the table, his gaze locked on the sleeping dog curled by the heater, Peter. Even in sleep, his body remained alert, ears twitching now and then, paws flinching at imagined scents or half-remembered alerts. His job was never truly over, not for dogs like him. Reeves leaned back, his spine stiff from hours on his feet, and in the stillness of that moment, his mind drifted back to when trust hadn't come so easily. He was 8 years old the first time a dog hurt him. The memory hadn't faded with time, it remained sharp, vivid. A neighbor's Rottweiler, a broken fence, a rush of teeth and growl and pain. The stitches were few, but the fear that followed was enormous. It lasted years, long after the wounds had healed. When he joined the police academy at 23, he never imagined he'd work with 9 units. He gravitated towards cybercrime, quiet, logical, removed. He could trace networks and pass data without ever being near teeth or claws. Then came the day that changed everything. 4th year on the force, he was assisting on a missing child call. The panic in the mother's voice still echoed in his ears. The child, 6 years old, had vanished from a grocery store parking lot. Witnesses saw a man grab her, pull her into an old van. Ethan was there when 9 Officer Patrice Williams arrived with a Belgian Malinois named Rex. Rex didn't bark, didn't hesitate. He leapt from the SUV and began tracking, nose to the ground, tail low, eyes scanning the horizon. Ethan followed, almost reluctantly. And then, in under 20 minutes, Rex led them into a derelict warehouse on the edge of the industrial district, straight to a locked storage unit. They broke it open. Inside, the little girl, scared but alive, the suspect caught before sundown. Reeves remembered watching as Rex sat calmly beside her, head slightly bowed, as if he knew what he'd done but didn't expect a thank you. That night, Ethan filled out an application for the 9 unit. His supervisor raised an eyebrow. "You? Really? I thought you hated dogs." "I used to," Ethan replied. "I don't anymore." 3 months later, he was on a flight to the Homeland Security 9 training facility in Texas. That's where he met Peter. The shepherd was 2 years old, lean, intense, with watchful eyes that always seemed to be processing more than they let on. But Peter wasn't a star recruit. He'd been rejected twice by other handlers. Not because he was aggressive, not because he was lazy, but because, as one trainer put it, he takes too long to alert. Most dogs, when trained to detect scent cues, explosives, narcotics, electronics, give an immediate signal when they smell a target. They sit, bark, paw, or freeze on the spot. Peter didn't. He would sniff, pause, circle again, recheck. He'd analyze, confirm. Then, only then, he would alert. "He's accurate," the head instructor Martinez had said, "but too slow for field testing. Won't pass certification benchmarks." Reeves had watched Peter during a demo exercise, a row of lockers, one of which contained a trace amount of explosive residue. The other dogs took 6 to 10 seconds. Peter took 27, but he got it right. He ignored a decoy locker loaded with a training distractor, a common mistake. "Cautious," Martinez said, arms crossed. "Too cautious." Ethan disagreed. "No," he replied, "he's just thorough." Martinez had smiled then slightly. "You two might actually be a match." The first few weeks were frustrating. Ethan, still learning to handle a working dog, made mistakes. Peter, resistant to over-commanding, sometimes ignored protocol in favor of instinct. They clashed. But then came the moment it all clicked. It was a mock airport sweep. Peter bypassed the training target, an explosive scent planted in a duffel, and instead alerted on a different bag. The instructors frowned. That bag wasn't part of the test. Inside it, a collection of prescription medications, technically legal, but one of them, used for heart conditions, contained trace chemical compounds that could be weaponized when combined with other ingredients. Peter had caught it. He wasn't late. He was just right. From then on, Ethan changed his approach. He gave Peter time, space, trust, and Peter gave him everything in return. They passed certification with the second highest score in the unit. The first went to a Belgian Malinois named Ghost, who barked too much but never missed. Peter didn't bark unless he meant it. And now, years later, after a day that had nearly seen an international flight vanish mid-air after unmasking a terrorist cell operating inside one of the most secure airports in the world, Peter still hadn't asked for anything. He hadn't sought praise, hadn't chased attention. He had just curled up by the heater and fallen asleep because he wasn't doing it for medals. He was doing it because he believed it mattered. Ethan stood and walked over, kneeling beside him. He rubbed behind Peter's ears gently, the way the dog liked. "You were supposed to wash out, huh?" he whispered. "Too slow, too analytical." "Not good enough." Peter shifted slightly in his sleep, but didn't wake. "You're not good enough, buddy," Ethan said softly. "You're the best." Behind him, a television screen quietly aired a breaking news segment. Hero 9 foils terror plot at O'Hare, the headline read. There were flashing images, security footage, a grainy clip of Peter blocking the pilot, voiceovers from experts explaining how 9 units can detect substances even the best scanners miss. Social media was already ablaze. The public wanted to know who the dog was, where he trained. Could they send him gifts? Could they adopt his puppies? But Ethan already knew what Peter would want. Not applause, not cameras, just the leash, just the vest, just the next mission to be continued in part 6. The world watched in awe. But Peter, he was already by the door, tail still, nose twitching, waiting for the next shift. Because for some heroes, the job is never finished. They stood under bright lights in a room filled with applause. The National Security and Aviation Safety Summit was in full session. Dozens of top officials from Homeland Security, TSA, FBI, and international agencies had gathered in the Washington Point, D.C. Auditorium. Flags lined the walls. A large projection screen displayed a grainy image of a German shepherd standing in front of a pilot, blocking his path. And in the front row, calm, composed, and still wearing his 9 vest, sat Peter. He didn't seem fazed by the attention. He didn't shift when the audience clapped. His ears twitched once. His tail remained steady. Beside him, in full uniform, stood Officer Ethan Reeves. It was Director Margaret Chen who took the podium. Her voice echoed through the room, measured, sincere. "We gather today not just to recognize protocol or precision," she said, "but to honor instinct. The kind of instinct that no machine can replicate, that no algorithm can emulate. The instinct of a dog who saw something none of us did and refused to let it pass." Cameras flashed. The applause rose again. Ethan didn't speak. He simply nodded once, hand resting lightly on Peter's back. He wasn't thinking about the ceremony. His mind was still at Terminal B. Still watching the moment, Peter made a choice that saved hundreds of lives. After the ceremony, several agents approached. One from France, another from Japan. They had heard what Peter had done. They asked about his training, about his process. Ethan answered politely, but briefly. The truth was, there was no easy explanation. Peter didn't operate by textbook. He didn't follow standard detection times. His alerts couldn't always be verified in under 30 seconds. And yet, time and time again, he had been right. Later that afternoon, as the guests began to disperse, an aide handed Ethan an envelope. Handwritten, light pink stationery with slightly uneven lettering. No return address. Inside was a short note printed in careful block letters. "Dear Peter, thank you for stopping the bad man at the airport. My mum was on that plane. I'm only 8. I still need her. You are the bravest dog I've ever seen. Love." Lila. Ethan read it once. Then again. The words were simple, but they cut deeper than any headline or award ever could. He folded the letter carefully and slid it into his inside pocket. Later that night, back in Chicago, he found himself outside the station, the wind biting harder than before, snowflakes dancing in swirls across the lot. Peter walked beside him, his steps steady, ears alert even now. They reached the edge of the quiet tarmac where it all began. The checkpoint, the lane where Peter stood his ground. Ethan stopped. He turned, knelt beside his partner, and for the first time in days, let himself breathe. He pressed his forehead gently against Peter's. God, I wish more people knew how to listen like you, he whispered. Peter stood still, accepting the contact, breathing with him. The wind picked up slightly, dusting them both with powdery flakes. A camera crew approached from a distance, quietly filming a documentary segment. Ethan stood and took a step back. Peter turned his head slowly and looked directly into the lens, not in fear, not in curiosity, but with a calm intensity. As if to say, you still don't get it, do you? We're not done yet. One photo captured that moment. The soft snow catching in Peter's dark fur, his amber eyes clear, unreadable, his body poised but not tense, present, grounded. The image would go viral within hours. And yet, Peter remained unchanged, because Peter didn't care about recognition. He cared about readiness. The following week, Ethan received his new assignment. He had been appointed as a special advisor to the TSA's National Canine Unit Program. His role would be to help train future handlers based not only on protocols and techniques, but on something much harder to teach: trust. When the letter came through, his sergeant had grinned. Promotion, prestige, desk job, you've earned it, Reeves. But Ethan had simply smiled and asked the only question that mattered to him. Can I still work with Peter? The answer was yes. Peter's role had changed too. He would now assist in training the next generation of nines, introducing younger dogs to the airport environment, simulating real-time detection drills, even evaluating handler-dog communication with remarkable subtlety. Some handlers joked that Peter could read the room better than most humans. Ethan didn't disagree. On their first day in the new position, Peter led a mock patrol through a training terminal. As new recruits watched nervously, the veteran dog moved with ease, pausing to investigate a suspect duffel, ignoring planted distractions, signaling quietly to a young pup named Scout to adjust his posture. Reeves watched it unfold with quiet pride. During a break, one of the trainees asked, "What makes Peter so good?" Ethan paused before answering. "It's not his nose," he said, "though that's world class. And it's not his training, though that's solid." He looked down at Peter. "It's that he never guesses. He waits, he watches, he listens without ego, without noise. He knows what he knows. And he won't stop until someone listens." The trainee nodded, unsure. Ethan smiled gently. "One day, you'll understand." That night, as the two of them walked toward the exit, the setting sun filtered through the glass walls of the facility, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Peter walked a few paces ahead, then stopped. Ethan caught up and saw why. In the far corner of the lobby sat a woman mid-30s, tear-streaked cheeks, clutching a child to her chest. Her daughter looked about 8. They weren't speaking, just holding each other. The woman met Ethan's eyes. She said nothing, but slowly she raised one hand in a gesture of thanks. Ethan nodded once. Peter turned and waited by the door. He didn't need the words. He never had. Final reflections. Would you trust the instincts of a creature who can't speak, but has never once been wrong? When machines fail, sometimes, it's a wet nose and silent stare that saves the world. We don't need more noise, we need more listening. And sometimes, that starts with a dog who never needed applause, just a leash and your trust. And as the snow settled outside the glass walls of that terminal, Peter remained steady, focused, waiting. Not for applause, not for medals, but for whatever came next. Because heroes like him don't walk away after one mission, they walk forward into the next. Maybe the world will never fully understand what made Peter stop that pilot, but maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe all it takes is one handler who listens. One moment of silence that speaks louder than any command. And one dog who refuses to move until someone sees what he already knows. So now we ask you, have you ever witnessed a moment where an animal's instinct saved a life or changed everything? We'd love to hear your story in the comments below. And if Peter's story moved you even a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful true stories of the incredible four-legged heroes who walk among us. Because sometimes the greatest thank you is the one that doesn't need to be said.